Hi everybody, it's John here again with another model in box review. Today I'm going to be talking about a beast of a helicopter. I did do a video before on a beast of a helicopter. That was the Mi-24 Hind. But this thing is actually bigger than that. This is the Sikorsky CH-53G Sea Stallion. And the model I'm building of it is a real beast because I'm building the Revell 1/48 scale version of this kit, of this helicopter rather. It's a nice image there of a German army transport helicopter in a, I think it's doing a nod to the crowd at an air show. We go into the boxing history. The kit was first released in 1981 in this style boxing in US Marine Corps markings. The kit does include the Jeep and the howitzer gun there, but they don't want you to build it for the German version because the German version didn't have that Jeep or the howitzer gun because they're American hardware basically, so you would never have seen it in the German aircraft. So though the Jeep and the howitzer isn't actually even mentioned in the instruction sheet on the German variants, but you do build them for the American ones. That's the 81 release. That was on Marine Corps markings. 1985 saw a USAF variant which was in service during the Vietnam War. The aircraft, it's marked there as Vietnam Rescue, but the aircraft was more so used for hardware evacuation and recovery, where its capacity came in handy because it enabled it to lift stricken aircraft in the field and bring them back for repair or for cannibalization of parts. That's the 85 variant in USAF markings for Vietnam War service. 1986 saw the first German variant, and this is the first time the boxings actually showed a picture of the real aircraft. Previous two boxings obviously were of the model, and this subject, the actual helicopter itself, I've always been interested in the Sea Stallion. I've always thought it was a really serious piece of kit, very impressive. The 86 model in there goes for the German Army. 1991 shows you a German Army commemorative motif version. I'm not sure what they were commemorating, but the aircraft is festooned with Pegasus horses for some reason or another. But again, it's German Army. 1993 gives you another German Army variant, but this time there's a change in the colour of the sprue. Sorry about that. Every boxing of this kit is released in green plastic, except for this boxing. This is the German Army's utilised for UN use. I'm not quite sure what the venue was for the UN covered German Army variant, but it was 1993, so I'm guessing it was probably something to do with Bosnia or Kosovo or somewhere like that. But it could very easily have been Africa, somewhere in Africa. I'm not 100% sure, but it probably would be worth looking into it if you had a model, this particular model to build. And it is handy having it in white plastic because white is a colour that's an absolute nightmare to cover green plastic in. So that's the 93 variant. The 2002 boxing, this is more like the modern boxing that you get with the more recent packaging of the German Army's Sea Stallion. It's interesting to note that the aircraft isn't actually called the Sea Stallion in any of the Revell's boxings. I don't understand why that is, because the aircraft is really called the HH-53 or RH-53 or MH-53 in US service, and it's a CH-53 in German service. It's not called a 53 anything in the Israeli service, where it's used as the Yasser, but the aircraft is called the Sea Stallion in both the German and the US services, and the MH-53 is actually called the Pavlo 4, and it's a variant of the Super Sea Stallion, which is the 3-engined variant of this particular aircraft. That's the 2002 boxing. Then you go to another American variant in the 2010 boxing. This again portrays the model in Vietnam colours with the US Army Air Force. Sorry, the US Air Force rather. And again it shows this 105mm howitzer, and the Jeep will obviously be included in it as well. The other thing that's worthy of note is that the American variants tend to be portrayed on the box with this in-flight refueling probe fitted as standard. Now the German variant often doesn't use the in-flight refueling probe, but it can have it fitted. If you want to model it with the in-flight refueling probe, it's not a problem. But the reason why they don't often have them in use is because their helicopters don't tend to exceed their normal ferry range, and in service with the German Air Force, the German Army. So, but they can utilise an in-flight refueling probe, so it's not an issue if you want to fit one. That's the USAF variant, probably Vietnam, but it was used often in that variant when it was home based in the US. And the version I'm doing a review on is this one, the 2013 release, CH-53GA Heavy Transport Helicopter. So that's the boxing history going from 1981 to 2013. So it gives you an idea of how old this kit is. 1981, you're looking at, it's 28-year-old, isn't it? No, 26-year-old. 36-year-old, sorry, that's better. 36-year-old. So it's getting on, isn't it? This kit is getting on. So I'm expecting the sprues to have quite a bit of flash. We'll just leave the boxing history and leave you another image of a real helicopter there. I really do like the image of this helicopter. It is a serious piece of kit, isn't it? Anyway, we'll pull the camera in the usual manner and get it to it'll focus on the box in hand, and there's the box in hand. There's my hand up against the box. It's a big box, big massive box. There it is, and that's the CH-53 in 48 scale. We'll take the lid off. What I want to do also is take all the gunk out and put the plastic down on the floor for now, because it's just going to get in the way. First of all, we've got the health and safety pamphlet, which everybody gets in every Revell kit. Safety advice. Paint and glue should be kept away from children over the age of 8. Yeah, supervise them when modelling when they're under the age of 8. Usual crap. We'll open the page first because I want to take the stuff out in the middle. I want to go through in a minute. As with all Revell kits, you have a photograph on the top of the plans. This one's slightly different because that photograph is of a real helicopter. Normally you get pictures on the instruction leaflet here of the model made up, but with this model it's the real McCoy. Safety tips down there. Not safety tips, they're actually modelling building tips. Yeah, and you've also got some instruction key codes here. Not sure why that's got 18 on clear parts, but it's the usual clear codes you get with Revell kits. Yep. And on the bottom here, on this side, you've got a paint key, and there's quite a lot of different paints to use. Some of them are actually have to mix them certain percentages. 3 different letter codes, F, N and Q, are to mix 2 different colour paints together. And also on the bottom here you've got I've never seen this on the instruction leaflet. This is really interesting. This is a key code for using filler on models. So they're actually saying that basically they're telling you you're going to need to use filler on this kit. So where you see this symbol, you're going to need to use filler. I don't think you're actually going to see the symbol on the plans. I think they're just trying to explain to you that you may need filler. This symbol is to drill a hole. There are quite a few holes on this kit's parts that have to be opened up because the two different variants use completely different parts, and I'll explain that in a minute. This is to remove tabs and additional bits from the parts of the sprue before using them, and this is to paint some parts before assembly. So some useful little keynotes there. Revell usually have a parts guide, a plan of the parts here, but this one's slightly different because on most of the plans of the parts it's telling you where all the parts are in the kit, but this one's also telling you that a lot of these parts on the sprues you don't use. So all the parts that are blacked out on that plan relates to the American variant of the CH53 model, because the American variant has different loadouts. I think it has different sponson, not sponsons themselves, the sponsons are the same for the main undercarriage legs, but it has different ends to them to incorporate an additional tank or to incorporate loadouts. It has different rotor blades, and it also has different air filters for the engines. The American one tends to have more complicated particle filters in front of the engines, which I think you might have seen a few of them on the photos of the boxings that we saw earlier. There's even, I think, two of the parts that you don't use on the transparencies that are used on the American ones, but they're not on the German ones. I just want to quickly go through to the end of the plan so I can ID how many steps there are. There's 54 steps. That's a lot of steps to this kit. As I said, it is a 48 scale kit, and it's not just an ordinary 48 scale kit. This thing is absolutely enormous. Steps 1 and 2 are basically to assemble the pilot and co-pilot seat in sub-assemblies. So, I mean, I would recommend that you paint the seats up before you put them into that backing plate, and then paint this up maybe before the head restraint, before you put it into the top of the seat. You'll get a better end result with that. You're going to see quite a lot of this cockpit through the glazing, because the cockpit on this aircraft is quite, the glazing at the front of the aircraft is quite substantial. Step 3 is the instrument panel assembly, and as you can see, I'm hoping you can see from that, the instrument panel assembly is quite detailed, isn't it? We'll have a look at the parts in a minute to see what they look like. Step 4 is to assemble the instrument panel to the flight deck, and there's another additional part there which looks like it goes in front of the flight deck. Step 5 is to build the bulkhead that goes at the back of the flight deck there, and there are 2 joysticks to assemble in front of the seats. And step 6 is to put the a lot of people think these are rudder pedals, but of course helicopter hasn't got rudder pedals, so what they actually are is tail rotor pitch control pedals. They actually adjust the tail rotor pitch left and right to enable the helicopter to spin on its torque axis of its main rotors. Step 7 is the fuselage halves, and it's explaining there the different colours you use to paint the interior. But it's also, there's this little symbol here for cutting out holes. Can you see that? Cutting out holes. So you've got a fair few number of holes to cut out up and down this kit. Step 8 is to assemble all the sub-assemblies to the flight deck, the two seats and the tail rotor pedal bay there. And then step 9, you've got some internal windows, the nose wheel well, which needs to be painted and then glued in place. And then there's your symbol there to let it set aside to dry. In that case, it's looking at 25 minutes. I usually give sub-assemblies to dry at least 24 hours. And then you know, even with atmospheric conditions, it should be dry and ready to move on. Step 10 is the application of the main rotor shaft and the internal windows for the port side. And step 11 is to fit the flight deck and the cargo bay floor into the fuselage half. And then you get some other internal details which it's nice to see. Even on a kit this side, it's still nice to see because sometimes you don't get this. Step 12 is a sub-assembly for I'm not quite sure what it is, but it looks like part of an avionics bay to the internal section of the fuselage there. It sits inside the forward section of the port fuselage. And step 13 is to add some additional parts to it. Can you see this? It looks like a locker, but it can't be a locker inside. It might, I don't know, it might be. Step 13 is add the top and bottom, plus what looks like an oxygen bottle, or maybe it's a stores sack or something, I'm not quite sure. It's difficult to see exactly what that is. Might have to look at some photos of the inside of this to see what's going on. Step 14 is to apply that to the port side, fuselage half. And step 15 is to put the window in the raised cargo loading door. This is the bit that goes up into the top of the cargo aperture. And step 16 is to build the lower cargo loading door. You've got do not cement these ramps that come out of the door, the main door there at the end. Step 17 is to apply the tail rotor shaft into this assembly aperture here, put the door into the top, and then fix the fuselage halves together and set aside to dry. And they're even telling you to jig up with tape, which is nice here. And then section 18 is to fit the lower loading ramp door. Again, you don't cement that into place, it should just pop into place and it should move up and down. It should lower and raise, you know. Step 19, step 19 is the main undercarriage wheel assemblies. It's showing you there how to build it, and here you repeat it once more to make it twice. These are the main undercarriage sponsons. Section 20 and 21, that's port and starboard. And section 22 is the canopy glazing. And you can see there that virtually the entire front end of this helicopter, half of it is glazing. So you're going to be able to see quite a lot of what's going on inside the kit. Here you've got the folded front nose wheel door and a cargo hook that fits just into that recess there. And then you've got the nose wheel assembly here in section 24. And in section 25 you fit them partially into this housing here and partially into the wheel well. Section 26 and 27 is the the engine nacelles. And the engine nacelles, you've got a rear cover plate there that goes inside to represent the exhaust system on the General Electric engines. And then in 27 you've got an option of two different types of air filters. This one here is basically a non-filtered engine where you've got the front of the turbo shafts fan blades there. That represents the front of the engine, and these two these represent the particle filter that goes in front of this part. But if you want those in, you don't fit this part, you just fit those straight to the front of the nacelle. As I said before, these parts are generally for the US variant, because the US variant have permanently fitted with these, but the German variant is often just fitted with the unfiltered version, but they do use these particle filters for their helicopters in service as well. Right, section 28. This is very interesting, because what they're asking you to do, by the look of this, is to they're asking you to score with a felt tip marker or a pen, or maybe a paint pen. Lots of people use paint pens for this, and they're asking you to draw. I think they're actually asking you to fill in the panel details with an ink pen. I've never seen that before on a model. And also here they're asking you to fill these two holes here, which are utilised for the US variant. That's really interesting. I've never seen that before on an instruction leaflet. Section 29 is the starboard engine assembly. Again, it's just followed exactly the same from the port engine assembly, and you can choose from either the unfiltered or the filtered variant. Section 31 is to apply the engines to the port side, and then section 32 is to apply the starboard engine into place, and also there's a couple of little avionics housings on the tail, and the tail plane itself goes into place in 32A. 32B are more avionics parts that go on the port side of the forward. I can only describe it as the transmission housing, which is here. There's some bits and bobs that go on this housing here in between the engines. Section 34 is more avionics that fit onto the airframe. This goes on the sponson here. There's a little, I think that's a shaft dispenser. I'm not sure 100%, but I think it is. And that might be a flare or shaft dispenser, or maybe avionics. That's an aerial that goes on the front just above the canopy. And then 35, you've got the avionics for the other side, and an aerial on this side. Section 37 is the running rail that goes along the top of the fuselage, and section 38 is more avionics and aerials. These go on the top of the fuselage on the starboard side. Can you see that? Section 41, you have more avionics and aerials, bits and bobs that go underneath the helicopter, and section 42 is a sub-assembly. I believe section 42 to 43, and then 44. Actually, section 42 to 47 is the small sub-assembly story to come up with this piece of equipment. And let's just see where it goes, and I might have an idea what it is. I think it's a winch, or I don't know, it might be something else. 48, no it's not, it's something else. This piece of equipment that's made between 42 and 47, I believe, is some sort of avionics package to do with maybe a forward-looking infrared camera, or it might be a forward-looking infrared sensor for terrain-following radar. You've got other avionics here which would suggest that it's probably an FLIR. You've got two, they look like probe antennas, and two what look like SIGINT packs which go on the front. They're like intelligence gathering equipment. So this might be all to do with like a terrain following radar for nights, for working in all weathers and after dark. there's more avionics that go around the nose of the helicopter. It's quite detailed actually. There's quite a lot of stuff going on the front of this helicopter. It's quite interesting. Section 50 is the tail skid. That's in the retracted position. If you want it lowered, the shaft would come down and this part would be lowered into a more triangular shape below the airframe. I'm not sure whether you would just put that in a different position, but it's stating to leave that in the raised position. I want to show you what the lowered position looks like. Can you see that on the back of there? That's the lowered position for the tail skid. It's like a support to stop the tail rotor hitting the ground when it's landing. And section 52 is to build, section 51 is to build the tail rotor, and that will just glue onto the pin that you put in earlier. Section 52 is to build the main rotor hub, and section 53 is to apply all the main rotors and the top rotor cover pin. And then you leave this all to dry, I would say a day. And to be honest with you, I mean, it actually states here not to glue the rotors in place. I wouldn't glue the rotors in place in a million years. Yeah, interesting. Now then, your paint guide. Basically, your paint guide is for two variants, I believe. Yeah, there's two variants. There's one in an all-over olive green drab colour, but it's not the US green, it's the NATO olive green. It's a lot darker than the US one. That's the single green tone variant, but they also do, in the German army, they did what was called a lizard camo scheme, which was like that. And the lizard camo scheme, I believe, had three different colours. It was two-tone green and brown, I believe, very dark brown. And this is for more of a modern German army version. Most of the ones that I saw in the 70s and the early 80s were a single green colour, but I believe this is a more modern helicopter, maybe the 90s, 2000s. The aircraft, I believe, is still in service. And then 57, you've got a decal guide for the tail rotor and main rotors. So Revell are actually clearly labelling an awful lot of the work that you have to do in this kit in the instruction leaflet, and it does tell you virtually everything you have to do without too much trouble. So that's the instructions. We'll quickly go on to the decals, because the decals on this kit are extensive. A lot of them are common to both. A lot of them are to do with the rotor blades. Yeah, they're quite serious, aren't they? The register on the decals is superb, like you would expect from Revell. They're not just very good, they're excellent. They're really, really good. The register is superb. You can read virtually everything. My eyesight's dreadful, but I can make out that those are actual words. They're not just blobs of white on that red square there. That's danger, engine blast. That's the emergency release hatches for the cockpit and doors. Yeah, they're a nice set of decals. They're exactly what I'd have expected from Revell. And some of these decals relate to avionics. These relate to all the avionics that are fitted onto the nose and the sides of the aircraft. So they haven't left anything. They've covered decals for virtually everything you can possibly imagine that you'd need them for. But these, I think these are to do with the main rotors. These decals go on the main rotors. But I'm not sure about these. There might be something. Let's have a quick look. There might be the walkways on the top of the fuselage, if I remember right. There's two walkways, and they have decals for them. I'm sure they do. Don't for the lizard print. Yeah, there they are. These go on the undercarriage sponsons, the main undercarriage sponsons from the back, and there are no walkway strips. Yeah, and these I think are to do with the rotor blades. They go on the rotors. There's 6 rotors on this kit, and there are 6 sets of white stripes in 4 groups. So there must be something to do with the rotors, I would have thought. But the decals, the decals aren't too thick. I can feel the ridges on the decals, so they're definitely apparent that they're there. But the thing that I like about Revell decal sheets is the carrier film on the decals is virtually clear, crystal clear, transparent. You can't see it at all, but you know it's there because you can see there's a slight glint, but you can't see it against the backing sheet. These decals, you know, they're going to go on beautiful, aren't they? So, with that, I'm now going to show you what you get in the box and why I call this kit the beast of all helicopters. Let's take the plastic out of the bag, shall we? There's one bag, and there's another bag. So there's 2 bags of plastic, right? We'll deal with this bag first because there's only 2 sprues in this bag. I believe there's 6 green plastic sprues and 1 transparent in all. That might be 5. No, it's 6. It is 6. This sprue incorporates an awful lot of the American parts. But this kit was first moulded in 1981, and I'm looking at the moulds on this kit, and I'll tell you what, they're quite good. The turbines for the engines there, I'll tell you what I'll do, I'll take this one out. I don't think you need the scissors to get these out, because they're just taped up. But we'll take this one out so I can show you, hopefully, and get it in focus on the camera, and then you can see what I mean. This sprue incorporates the non-particle filtered engine intakes, and I'm hoping you can see them there because they are really nicely moulded. The turbines there, you can just see them there. Look. The turbines there aren't overdone, but they are pronounced enough for you to make them visible with paint. So you should be able to get a good result, and it should look quite nice. And I'm tempted to use these rather than the particle filtered ones, because the particle filtered ones, I'll be honest with you, they're a bit of a shit thing to bloody paint. They're not a nice item to paint, and the finished result of these I think would look a lot better on the kit, which is what you want. You want the thing to look right. So the quality of the parts on this model are excellent. The mouldings are really crisp, they're quite pronounced. There's not a lot of flash on this kit. I'm looking at it, I can't see hardly any flash on this kit. There is a little bit of, there are a few bits and bobs, tabs on the parts which have to be removed. And this is probably what the instruction was talking about, removing tabs, because on these rotors you've got little pin tabs here. Not quite sure what their purpose is. Perhaps there's something to do with to ensure that the rotor blades are fully cast. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's a nice sprue, nice set of parts involved there. I like that. Very good. This is some avionics and railings on this kit, plus the instrument panel, which is here. There's a part here which is virtually on the verge of snapping, which I'm a bit, yeah, I'm not quite sure what that's for, where it's for. I think it's probably the warp railing on top of the fuselage, but I could be wrong. The instrument panel, I'm hoping you can get it into focus there, the instrument panel is quite nicely moulded. Again, it's not over the top and you should be able to paint that up lovely and nice. Do they give you a decal for the instrument? I don't think they do for the instrument panel. No, they don't. So that will be painted up with paint. You should be able to get that quite nice. And that's the instrument panel cover that goes over the top. Again, the parts on this sprue are very crisply, highly detailed. They're very nice. And when you think this kit is the age it is, there's not a lot of flash. There's not a lot of problems with the parts apart from that. I think that's something to do with storage, that might. But yeah, I'm quite pleased with the way these parts look. Now then. This is a sprue that's going to blow your mind. I did a review recently on the Airfix Vulcan, the 72nd scale Airfix Vulcan, and I stated that you need probably an area in your house about 3 foot square to house that kit in your home. You're going to need an area a bit bigger than that for this thing. This thing is massive. A couple of parts loose off the sprue here. That is. Let's get some signals over your phone when you're trying to do videos. It's a nightmare, isn't it? Right. That's interesting. On the first sprue, you had an instrument panel. And I've got another one here. This is another instrument panel. This is a different one. And I've got a feeling this is the old one for the US variant. And the one I've got is for the new variant with the glass canopy. It's got the glass instrument panel on it. And those are definitely older style dials on that instrument panel. Don't think you can see it very well there, but they are definitely older style parts. It's a shame you can't see that. Can you see that? Not very easily, it's a shame. But the other instrument panel had TV screens on it, and I'm guessing that they were more of a modern flight deck. That's one of the undercarriage sponsons. That part is about 5 inches long. It's quite large. Fuselage halves. Here is a fuselage half for this kit. You can see my hand against it. It's quite big. The exterior is quite extensively riveted. Now, when this kit was designed, it was designed by Sikorsky in the early 60s. And it entered service in about 1967-68 with the US Marine Corps and US Air Force in Vietnam. And in those days, the helicopters were quite extensively riveted, and this kit is actually riveted everywhere except for the access cowlings for the engine and transmission assembly. And also, it's not riveted around the nose. But it is riveted everywhere else. And I'm telling you, it's not that overdone. I don't think you'd need to file them. I think they're about the right height. They look about right. The inside of the fuselage is quite nicely detailed as well, if you can see that. You can see that there you go. That's rivet and panel details for the inside of the cargo bay, but it doesn't follow all the way through the inside, probably because Revell realise that you're not going to be able to see an awful lot through those windows. I hope you can see the detailing on this fuselage, because the fuselage is quite nicely detailed. And the rivets, you can see they're not that bad when you think this kit is 48 scale. I think they're, I don't know, they might need a tiny bit of sanding down, but not a huge amount. God, I've got a right frog in my throat tonight, I don't know what's going on. This is just a little slight test fit for you, so you can see what the damn airframe looks like when it's together, but it's nice, isn't it? It's yeah, I like the look. I've always liked the SCH-53. I've always thought it's a nice, impressive looking chopper, and I think this is going to be an impressive looking model of it. Very nice indeed. So that's the fuselage halves. Quite impressed with that. Take these two bits out of the equation as well. Right, this is the next sprue. There's a few parts on here that aren't used on the German variant, and the parts I'm looking at are these four. These four parts here are loadout adapters for the sponsons. They would carry US standard extending range fuel tanks for the helicopter, and these are used on the Israeli variant, the Yasser, but I'll be honest with you, I've never seen them on a CH-53. They probably have the capacity to use them on a CH-53 with the German Air Force, but I've never seen them. So there's that to think about. They're the fillets for the particle filters, and there's the particle filters parts here. There's two here, and they're the fillets for them. See that? That's the horizontal stabilizer, or the tailplane, as some people call it. There's lots of wheels here which relate to the Jeep and the gun, which come inside the cargo hold. I will be making the Jeep and the gun, but I'll probably be building them as a separate project. Because they're US, they're not really German. But there they are in the kit. There's the Jeep body shell. There's all the wheels for the Jeep. And there's the wheels for the gun. The kit itself is really, as I said before with the other sprues, it's really, really nicely detailed. There's enough here to pick out and make it look really nice. So, top marks for Revell. You know, I think as far as kits are concerned, modern release kits are concerned, I'm not sure if anyone else does a 48 scale version of this kit. I haven't seen another 48 scale version of this kit. But as far as Revell are concerned, I think they've done a reasonable job, and by modern standards, I think the actual detail and accuracy of the kit might call into question a bit here and there. But I think they have tried to address some of the accuracy of the kit by releasing new parts on different sprues throughout the boxing history. I think the 2013 release, I think, is the one that had the upgraded instrument panel. So there's a bit of flash on this sprue as well, but it's not really holding to the parts, it's really holding to the sprues, except on the Jeep. Look, there's quite a bit of flash on the Jeep which will need to be removed, but it's not really going to be a problem, is it? So that's that sprue. And then we get to the last sprue. And this gives you an idea of the size of the aircraft. You've got the flight deck and cargo bay there. And that's my hand. So the flight deck and cargo bay is pretty similar to the length of my hand. You got the rotors here. I'm not sure whether these are the American or the German rotors, but there are two different sets of rotors for the two different variants. There are two different sets of sponson adapters for the loadouts between the American and the German versions. And there are other parts as well relating to the American and German version that aren't used. This here you've got the trellis here for the gun, and either side here is the in-flight refueling probe. And I'm pretty sure the instruction leaflet states that you don't use any of this, except for that bit there, and these two. Everything else, I think, is pretty much American. So that's the sprues. The kit looks very impressive, and I'm very, very excited about putting this thing together and working on it. I think it would go together absolutely beautiful. Looking forward to that very much indeed. So before we pack this up, I'll just go through the transparency sprue, because the transparency sprue, everyone thinks, denotes the quality of the kit. So here we go. I'll just cut this out because it's doing a transparency and I'm not coming out song on me. It's yeah, it's not having it. There we go. Right, here's the transparency sprue. There's all the windows in here. I think you've got a window loose in here somewhere. No, you haven't. I've just realised what it is. Sorry about that. You've got the internal windows here for the cargo bay, and you've also got, I think that's the windscreen for the Jeep. That one there, can you see it? I think that's the windscreen for the Jeep. And here we have the forward glazing for the forward airframe. And that's a large piece of plastic, isn't it? But the other thing that I like about it is that although it's a large piece of plastic and it is reasonably thick, you've got to remember this is 1982 technology for design and the way in which the sprues produce the plastic. And although that piece of canopy glazing is quite thick, if I put my finger, even pull it away a couple of millimeters, you can actually see my fingerprints through that glass. And even though it's going like it down the bottom here, there's quite a high curvature to the glass, right? Can you see that? You can see my fingerprints through that glass. Now to me, that means it's not distorting the light that goes through the glass too much and making the image, what you're going to see through the glass canopy, you're going to be able to see it quite clearly. So I'm very impressed with that. That is a really nice glass canopy. Probably wouldn't be as good as, say, an aftermarket one, but I'm quite happy to use that. That's quite nice. Very happy with that. So I think the kit is very impressive, and I like how Revell have detailed the kit and how the parts look. I've tried test fitting the fuselage, and the fuselage looks like it's going to go together quite well. Now then, technical gump. This kit is a Revell 1/48 scale Sikorsky CH-53G. The actual helicopter is called the Sikorsky C Stallion. And if you buy an American variant of it, it's often called a CH-53G, but it's not. It should be either an HH-53 or an RH-53, depending on whether it's used by the Marines or the USAF. The original release date of the kit is 1981, and its build model number is 04834 in 1/48 scale. The kit comprises of 6 green plastic sprues containing 210 parts and 11 transparency parts and 1 clear sprue, totaling 221 parts. Now this is an estimation because some of the boxings have less parts because they don't have the upgraded parts for the interior. The UN version is the only variant boxing of this model that is reproduced in white plastic. All the rest are reproduced in the green plastic that you've seen in the video. The kit measures 18 3/4 inches long, 18 inches rotor diameter and 4.5 inches high on its undercarriage. The initial cost of the kit, I have seen it as cheap as 15 quid, but you can pay £45 for it depending on the age and condition. The Sea Stallion is available in 144 scale by Revell, 1/100th scale by a company called Roscoff, 1/72nd scale by Academy, Airfix, Revell, Fujimi and Italeri, and also of course the 48 scale model by Revell. First impressions are, well, it is certainly big and it's impressive, but it's showing its 1980s vintage with all the rivets and the raised panel lines. But as I said before, the rivets and the raised panel lines, probably not so much, but the rivets don't look as big as they could have been. They probably might need a little bit of sanding down, but no, maybe not too much. It also includes a jeep and a gun, and for some reason there is a choice of rotors too, maybe the German and US parts. Well, that is true. The German and US rotors are different. It's not too expensive either, and if you hold out for a good price, I've seen it go for as little as 10 quid. There are no fit issues, and there's no fit issues that I've found from model reviews online. So it should be a fun build. It should go together quite easily without any problems. But bear in mind that this kit will require a lot of room in your home, and it will require at least 2 foot square. I would say 3 foot square to be on the safe side. The tail rotor rotates, the main rotors rotate, and the rear loading door, I believe, lowers and retracts. But everything else is static. So that's the Revell CH53 Sea Stallion in 48 scale. As I said before, I'm looking forward to this build. I think it will be an incredibly impressive model and built. And I hope I made a good job of it. I hope I can do it some justice. So if you like the video, give it a like, subscribe, have a look at my other videos. I've done quite a few model inbox review videos, and if you're interested in building a model that I have done a review on, have a look at the review. There's a lot of information there, a lot of boxing history if you're thinking about getting the kit, if you're thinking about collecting one. There's all sorts of information on these videos, and if you like them, subscribe, and I'll really appreciate if you do. Very much looking forward to doing some more videos for you lads. I'll see you soon on the next one. Good modelling. Bye bye.